I've been away much of the fall, as some of you have noticed, and it's really nice to be back. I truly have missed you. It's just really, really, really good to see you. Yeah. Anything interesting happen while I was away? I'm very aware that this is Thanksgiving week and we can do a little inquiry into gratitude, but I wanted to make some room before, and maybe even instead, we'll see how it goes, to inquire together, not so much directly what's coming up for you, but if there are questions about or inquiries that we just might talk about together, about how does our practice inform how we are navigating these days? And I just thought there might be curiosities or questions or struggles. I've had my own share of struggles with how to navigate some of the emotional roller coasters of these last few weeks. So just wanted to make a little room in case that's something you would like to do. Does anybody have something you're wondering about in terms of how, what does this mean? How are we supposed to be with this? That image, I've said it before, in one of the I'll stand up, one of the Indiana Jones movies where he's going after the Ark, and he's found it. It's like over there, or maybe it's down there, and he knows right where it is. It's sort of like our practice, we're offered this like immense gift of freedom from suffering, and it's just right there, and he pulls the lid off the container and he shines the torch down in, and he rolls over and he says, snakes. Why does it have to be snakes? And it's just sort of always snakes, that kind of before we get to the ark, there are these snakes, and it's often I think as we've kind of moved through these last couple of weeks, there are snakes, there are whatever our own personal version of snakes is, and it can be different. I mean, some of us have voted one way, some of us have voted another, and we all have our experience of this, and we'll go to our Thanksgiving dinners, surrounded by all these different experiences and maybe some snakes of our own, just, what gets touched. I got an email, and actually I've heard it many times and even said it myself. It's like, the reason I'm having this reaction is because of that thing that happened when I was 4. That it touches into all the old constructs that, are just sort of waiting there to say, hi there, do you remember me? And so anyway, I just wanted to make a little room if there are questions about what on earth do I do with this experience, or how does the Dharma help with this? Anybody have anything you want to wonder about together? You're all much more serene than I am, or,
Sure.
Yeah, Jeff.
Thoughts about how to hold our reaction, personally some strong reactions, and not just get caught up in just cycles of suffering.
Yeah. Did you all hear that? Jeff asked how to hold our reaction and not just get caught up in the cycle of suffering. Yeah. Anybody else have that? Yeah, I certainly do. Yeah. Well, I think there's, oh, golly, I'm trying to think of the specific quote, which is escaping me. But for one thing, I think to, somebody said, Dharma practice is one humiliation after another. We do get caught off in the cycle of suffering, It's like, you're sitting on your cushion and you just go, I'm, not going to get caught in thinking, right? And we just do. And so we get caught in the cycle of suffering. And sometimes it does trigger, something else that's old and conditioned and, we've been through a zillion times. So for starters, to give ourselves permission to lose our composure and to be lost and to be kind, to bring that same quality of kindness to whatever lostness we're in. It could be confusion or rage or rumination or whatever. So for starters, to just see it. Oh, the first noble truth, which we tend to skip over, and Philip Moffat talks about this beautifully, but the first noble truth is there is dukkha. Yeah, right, okay, fine, there's dukkha. But he says, the first noble truth is knowing dukkha. This is suffering, this caughtness, this rumination that I'm doing, this murderous rage, this fear, this whatever it is, this is dukkha. And to know it, to just know it. My last couple of essays on my blog, a little commercial here, are about that, really. Just know it. This is dukkha. This is what it's like to live in this human form. So for starters, I have a friend, in one of the essays I just wrote, I have a friend who is 78, and he's experiencing all kinds of medical problems that have to do with having a 78-year-old body. He's, been very athletic and robust, and he said to me the other day, he said, it's humiliating. I just thought that was so wise, It is. This being human is humiliating. We're just, funky little human beings. So for starters, A. And then to kind of keep noticing, and here's where the spaciousness comes in, that to bring a quality of kindness to our experience such that can we notice, in addition to whatever it is that is caughtness, that there's more. There's a larger space than just that. So maybe it's, I don't know, for each of us kind of connecting with that larger space. I've told you about a time when I was on retreat and I was just like ruminating the whole time, and I was like, furthermore, and I just started thinking, is there any part of my body that's not just reactive? And I went and I had to kind of look. My toes are okay. My toes are all right. But to kind of open awareness and include whatever is not that in awareness. And that's that spaciousness that we're trying to really open to in the loving kindness practice. That we open to this larger spaciousness so that it is known in a larger space. So for example, I don't know what it could be, like, I'm going to dinner and I'm going to have relatives of mine who will not be named, at that dinner, and and to just know that the difficulty that I experience with this person is not the whole of our relationship. Nor is it the whole of her, nor is my reactivity the whole of mine. So to kind of have a sense of a larger space, both internally, both spaciousness, and both about whoever, or whatever the other circumstance is. And then, as much as possible, to see if we can cultivate the capacity to be directly with the experience in our bodies, and to drop out of the rumination, which is, for me, I compare it to my fireplace, where you're kind of just feeding little twigs to the fire. The rumination place? Am I the only one who does that? Where you just find yourself kind of caught in this thinking. By the way, that's probably your cortisol, that's, your body that's kind of gotten activated, and it needs to be calmed down some. So, a bath or a walk in the woods or something like that to calm down the stress response. Again, the spaciousness. But then as much as possible to drop into what does it feel like, to feel in my body, to feel this experience. If we try to do that without the spaciousness, we'll just drop back into the trauma. So, to have the spaciousness and the wider awareness, which includes just saying, I have to leave this alone for a while. I have to just go to a funny movie, or I have to, go play with the dog or take a nap or whatever. Just say, I just don't have the resources to deal with this right now. So we keep touching into it. We just keep touching into it. Teresa and I did this wonderful retreat a couple months ago, and we did a lot of chanting. It was the first time I'd ever done like devotional practices. And I've been doing a lot of devotional practices these last, few months and weeks. A lot of chanting, which has just been really helpful. Where I can't feel much spaciousness myself, but the chanting is an invitation. In this case, it's a chant to Kuan Yin, who is the goddess, the embodiment of love and compassion. And so kind of offering my own goofiness to this incredibly larger space. And just chanting, and just sometimes it's just saying the words, which are, I don't know what the word is. I want to say, happier. The words of the chant are a better use of my mental faculties than the rumination. It helps my body and my mind kind of settle into a more spacious place. So whatever helps, does it, just a few thoughts about, because what Angel Kyoto Williams was noticing, when she was starting to work with the activists, and she's an activist herself, is she said, they're all so unhappy and angry, and they're not loving themselves. They're not loving themselves. How can they do any good anywhere if what's coming out is just this kind of rancor, So we start with ourselves, and if we can't do it out there, if we can't think about, XYZ relative or XYZ politician, if we can't think about them without our blood pressure starting to go up, then we just step back and we really practice. Honey, you're caught in dukkha. It's okay. It's okay. We can bring kindness to that. So we just work where we can. Yeah.
Well, I was originally going to talk about thinking of being compassion out to people who voted the way I did not, for example. My bottom line reaction to the election, dancing around that, was humility. That there was an awful lot of people who were hurting in ways that what I thought was good didn't solve that hurt. But when what Richard was saying, dukkha is suffering, or that's a bad translation, so he was using the original language. What did you think?
Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Need to clarify that. Yes, dukkha is suffering. Dukkha is the layer of angst that we add to something that isn't the way we want it to be. Here's somebody who has a view that's different from mine, or the weather's different, or I broke my favorite teacup, or whatever it is. And then dukkha is sort of the layer that's added on top of that, that kind of keeps it cooking, that keeps it going. Okay? Yeah. And the thing about offering, that's so beautiful, that thought of, just offering kindness or compassion to the suffering of others. I just would have one caution that sometimes we can, if we look closely, we can kind of notice that there's a bit of a subtle tendency, and I was trying to address this before, whether it's the loving kindness practice or a compassion practice. It's like, if I offer you loving kindness, you will see the error of your ways. Yeah, right. I didn't get that at all from what you were saying. Or if I offer loving kindness to my own emotional experience, then I'll stop feeling that way. Then I'll like have a better emotion or something like that. And the thing is, it does change, but that isn't how it changes. Because that's a sort of kind of coming into a, if I offer this to you, then you'll be different. But yeah, that wasn't at all what the energy was. So we just sort of look to see, is there really an opening of my heart to include all of it? Yeah. You look, is that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But thank you for asking about, we use those words and forget to define them. Yeah. Anything else? Joan?
Reaction to what you were saying.
Okay.
And when you
Joan said she had some reaction to what I was saying. Yeah.
when you're talking about the expansion and the openness,
Yeah.
my thinking is to get too open, you can fall into it. And isn't it better when you're talking about it to have some structure to it so that you feel safe?
Absolutely.
And when it's open like this, you're not always feeling safe.
Right.
Because it's so big.
Right.
And it can be frightening.
Yes. Yeah. So Joan, I don't know if correct me if I don't say what you said exactly right, but Joan is saying that, if you open kind of too much, you can sort of fall into something or really kind of come into a place where it's really scary. You don't feel safe. And isn't it better to have some kind of structure to it? Yeah.
And then about the anger is, we always think of anger as a dirty word.
Mm-hmm.
And it really isn't. Sometimes
Right.
anger can be a force towards good.
Exactly.
Because you take that anger and you do something with it.
Right.
And I think when we're feeling this way, the people who were doing things, when I'm talking to a number of my friends, how many are going on that march to Washington? They're doing something.
Yes.
They're feeling better about
Right.
it.
Right.
And
Right, I want everybody to hear you, so I'm just going to pause there. So Joan is saying that anger can have such a wholesome quality. It can kind of, inform a really wholesome doing. And so, it's not a dirty word. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it gets translated as anger in the suttas, the Pali Canon, but really, it is more like hatred that is troublesome. That place where, we're kind of, and I think that's what Angel Kyoto Williams is speaking to, where this sort of sense of, we're kind of contracted into a resistance and a struggle. And, I can kind of feel it myself when there's a quality of just, standing up and speaking and just sort of inhabiting, if you will, the structure of myself, really, and protecting that. Versus sometimes, I can feel like I'm sort of burning up, or just kind of really squunched in a way that is more reactive. Sort of like that "don't mess with me" place. So it has a different flavor to it. So yeah, of course, any emotional experience has a wholesome quality to it.
Yeah, every emotional experience has two sides.
Yes, yeah, probably even more than two. Joan said every emotional experience has two sides, which is to say it isn't like, this is bad. And that's exactly the point, really, of this loving kindness practice of just like, can we include everything, not as a way of sort of indulging our neuroses or, saying, everything's okay and just it's all fine and you can, kind of go murder people and it's really all right, it's really good. But can we include everything in the sense of, it's like this, can we inquire into where the suffering is and where the holding is, where people are kind of stuck in grasping and shutting down. And it is kind of scary. It can be really kind of scary to let go of some of the ways that we have hunkered down. And each of us has a different quality maybe of conditioning around that. What were the circumstances of our lives and how much did we need to kind of, if you will, hunker down and pull in. And so it can be kind of challenging to soften and open. Ultimately, the invitation is to soften and open. I had a wonderful experience with my mother just before she died, and I think it really had to do, she had dementia, and I think her dementia helped her with this, in that she actually had some moments where I just felt like she touched God, where she was just so spacious and so open. And that I think that she wasn't getting all tangled up in her concepts. It was lovely being with her in that way. But all of us have, we are where we are. We have to be where we are. And so the invitation is to be with this and see if there is suffering, if there is a layer of suffering that is optional. If I'm feeding a quality of suffering that isn't really, it isn't really useful. Is there a way of opening? Is there a way of opening here that might be helpful? Is that, yeah, Gary.
The challenge for me is trying to reconcile the inner and outer, wanting to both act skillfully, mindfully, with loving kindness, while simultaneously feeling rage and outrage of what's happening, wanting to center myself and feel it peaceful, while at the same time knowing there needs to be outward action.
Yeah.
And finding middle ground.
Right.
Or finding
Yeah.
a way to be.
Yeah. Gary's saying that, reconciling the inner and the outer really with such a strong intention of bringing kindness and wholesome action, skillful action, and at the same time feeling just, a lot of rage or a lot of fear. Maybe you didn't say fear, but, for me it's fear. But, feeling a lot of, rage and just like how do we navigate?
And then knowing what is skillful.
And knowing what is skillful, right. Again, we go back to my thought about Jeff's question. We'll make mistakes. We'll make mistakes. We'll kind of go, no, maybe not so much.
Feels like our margin of error is much less.
Our what?
Our margin of error is much less sometimes than other times.
Yeah, true. And so, I think we've all had the experience of sitting with something, even if it's that, email that you get at 11 o'clock at night, and you go, well, I have an opinion about that, and you think, and then you think, no, Sharon, you should, just sleep on it a little bit. Just pause here a minute. Let's just kind of step back and see what kind of response might be wise here. That we've all had the experience of both acting without wisdom and discernment, kind of reacting, kind of something triggers me, and I'm like, little cat, fighting back, reacting. And that place where we can kind of step back into spaciousness, where I think, all right, well, maybe if I sleep on this, maybe I'll have a little more spaciousness tomorrow morning, And so we know the experience of responding with wisdom and discernment. What's helpful here? What could conceivably be useful for me, for somebody else? And so I think the invitation in terms of, how do we be with these experiences, and the invitation of the loving kindness practice is to kind of be with our own experience well enough and kindly enough and compassionately enough that wisdom and discernment begins to open. And we see more clearly what needs to be done, and even more particularly, what is mine to do. We can look at our world and we think, gee, there's a lot to be done, but if I try to do it all, I will fail at everything. So really, what's mine to do? So can we step back from the reactivity into whatever it is that we need to do that will help us do that? All the things that I've mentioned, and each of you could mention 100 more. Can we step back enough to get a little bit more space so that whatever the response is isn't just kind of shooting out from that reactivity? And we all know the reactivity, so it isn't like the reactivity is bad. What it is it's just a signal to me that there's some wounded place that before I try to act needs my care. That's that place. I need to bring loving kindness to this experience, because otherwise I'm going to murder somebody. But isn't it great? Isn't it great that we understand why people murder people? Really? Is there anybody here who doesn't understand why people murder people? Because we all know this place where the feelings and the woundedness is so strong. So can we bring care to our own woundedness enough so that we can kind of settle a bit, not like trying to get rid of whatever the experience is, but settle so that it's not the only thing that's there, and that it has the wholesome energy that Joan is talking about that allows us to kind of really stand up and say, no. But we do it in a way that's not adding. It's not intending to add. That has. So it's this dance between really caring for ourselves well enough. It's like we're going to go to Thanksgiving dinner, We're going to go to Thanksgiving dinner. It's a very practical question. How do I prepare myself? How do I care for myself well enough that there's some spaciousness? I remember a social event I went to with my husband, and I said, I need you to stay with me. This is going to be really hard for me to kind of just keep breathing. I need you to stay with me. I need somebody next to me who's not caught in my own experience. So, whatever helps. And we practice it. This is the place. This is the place. Pat and I were talking the other day. We had a couple long talks in the last couple of weeks. But we were talking about this is where the rubber meets the road, huh? You say, oh, loving kindness, it's really nice, and dukkha, and suffering, and, freedom from suffering, and a little meditation. We're going to have, but it, this is, this practice is not for the faint of heart, So your question is such a great one. How do I do it? We had a group, we have a White Awake group where we've been meeting for a year. We'll tell you about it in a couple of weeks. Working on our own white racism, really, to uncover it. And it just, I said to everybody last night, it's so great to just have a space of friends where we can kind of just talk together about what it's like, and our own confusions and struggles. So maybe a friend who can kind of, love us and hold our hand and just really know, I know what it's like to be caught, so I can be with you when you're caught. It's okay, And we try to keep breathing. And it's hard. And we love ourselves anyway. The spiritual practice is not for the faint of heart, is it? Yeah. We get it, why people murder people. It seems like a much better idea. Really? Nobody murders anybody because they think it's a stupid idea. Nobody does that. They think it's a really good idea at the time. Somebody, road rage or something like that. They think it's a good idea at the time. And it's just that they can't contain these feelings that we're working to be kind with and have spaciousness around. Yeah. So there we are. It's humiliating, isn't it? This being human. But here we are, and we love each other, and we love ourselves, and we carry on. We do that. Yeah. So may you have a truly sweet, I was going to say splendid, that might be too much to ask, but a sweet, nourishing, fulfilling, thank you, holiday. Yeah. 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 No. May there be goodness. May there be unexpected goodness. Really, could there be just some curiosity about where this goodness is going to blossom for me? And let yourself be surprised. And I'll see you next week. Actually, we'll see you next week. Pat and I are going to teach together next week. So we're going to kind of continue this a little bit. Pat and I will do a little dog and pony show or something. So blessings, and we'll see you then.